Welcome back to the channel. This morning we're going to take a little departure from the typical reseller content and focus on the 20 most famous photographs. Found a website here with the 20 most famous photos, so I wanted to go through and share those photos as well as a little bit about the history of those images. So for those of you that might not know, I'm also a freelance photographer in addition to the reseller content I put out there. That's my full-time gig as a reseller, but I like to go out and take photos, have several freelance photography gigs set up, so I'm out there taking photos, and ultimately this whole journey in this YouTube channel is designed to help me make some money and eventually get out there and take more photos. So I want to thank everybody for watching and consider subscribing at this moment. But without further ado, let's get into those top 20 most famous historical photos. Let's take a look. This article can be found at digitalphotomentor.com. That's where I found it, and we're going to go through starting at number 20, working our way to number 1. Let's take a look at number 20 here. At number 20 is Harold Egerton Milk Drop Coronet from 1957. There it is. Look at that beautiful shot. It says here that electrical engineering professor Egerton began a series of experiments in his MIT lab, inventing a camera that would photograph a fleeting moment in the dark. Combining high-tech strobe lighting and camera shutter that would enable the photographer to capture a moment invisible to the naked eye, he set up a milk dropper next to a timer along with his camera. His stop-motion photograph was able to freeze the impact of a drop of milk on a table, and cemented photography's importance in the world of advancing the human understanding of our physical world. There it is, 1957, a milk drop hitting that table. Interesting. At number 19 is Robert Capa's image, The Falling Soldier from 1936. Here's a look at that image. Says here, Capa's image of a Spanish militiaman being shot was taken without him ever looking through his viewfinder. Captured by holding his camera above his head while in the trenches, this image took war photography to a different level. Soon after, journalists began to be formally embedded into army units as their importance in capturing and documenting the horrors of war was realized. There it is, a look at the horrors of war. I got photographers on those front lines taking photos. Definitely a historical image from 1936. At number 18 is W. Eugene Smith, an image entitled Country Doctor from 1948. Here's a quick look at that image. The article has a quote by Smith that says, "I do not seek to possess my subject, but rather to give myself to it. I do not seek to possess my subject, but rather to give myself to it." W. Eugene Smith. The article says here, Smith's aim was to see the world from the perspective of his subjects, and for the viewers looking at his work to do the same. This image is taken from his photo essay, Country Doctor, was taken after Smith had spent 23 days with the subject. They go on to say, following the doctor around and really getting to know him, Smith was able to capture the essence of his subject through a single frame. This image and accompanying essay became a template for the form which many have emulated since. But the image was part of the large photo essay which set a new standard for this genre of photography, photojournalism. So that's interesting. He followed him around for 23 days, little photojournalism, got this picture of the doctor. Looks like walking to some sort of patient there. They got the picket fence there. 23 days he spent with him. At number 17 is Edward Muybridge, The Horse in Motion from 1878. There it is, The Horse in Motion. Never seen this, but one of the most historic photos. The article says here, embarking on a task to discover whether a horse takes flight when galloping, photographer Edward Muybridge was commissioned by California Governor Leland Stanford to prove his theory. Muybridge developed a technique to capture the horse using an exposure lasting just a fraction of a second. He had 12 cameras lined up that were triggered to photograph in rapid succession by the galloping horse. The series of images Muybridge captured didn't just prove that a horse does indeed take flight, they also led the way for a new way of using photography with other technology to capture the truth. His method led the way for the development of animation and motion pictures. There it is, that was the beginning. Animation and motion pictures came after that, but this was 1878 when the governor got him to do these photos. Pretty interesting. Look at history. At number 16 with Dorothy Lange, Migrant Mother from 1936. Here's a look at that image. The article says here, on assignment for the Resettlement Administration, Dorothea Lange was tasked to capture the plight of those most affected by the Great Depression in 1936. Lange tightly framed 32-year-old Thompson and her young children, drawing the viewer into the pain and exhausting etched on her face, which appears aged beyond her years. Upon her return, Lange's now famous photograph became the most iconic image of the 160,000 taken to document this desperate time. The government acted upon seeing the suffering and spent 20,000 pounds of food and sent 20,000 pounds of food. Wow. So I might not have said that correctly, but it looks like she took 16,000 photos and the government reacted by sending 20,000 pounds of food to help with the relief from the Great Depression in the 1930s. Take a look at that. That's interesting to know that that's the face of a 32-year-old right there. So the Great Depression definitely put a few years on her face right there. At number 15 is Philip Halsman, a photo titled Dolly Atomicus from 1948. Here's a look at that photo. Wow, there's a lot going on in that one. Things flying around. The article here says Philip Halsman's life's work was to capture the essence of those he photographed. Knowing a standard portrait of the flamboyant Salvador Dali was not going to wash, he set out to create something extraordinary. They had Halsman even roped his wife and his daughter to assist in throwing the cats and water into the frame. After 26 shots, they finally captured this image that has echoes of Dali's own artwork in it. Note, remember that was all film, so had to be done in a single frame. There was no Photoshop. Halsman and Dali both had an unusual sense of style and creativity. Some might even say bizarre. They collaborated on many projects together, including Halsman recreating one of Dali's paintings of a skull using human nude figures. Halsman helped to shape modern-day portrait photography. His images of Dali, Albert Einstein, Marilyn Monroe, Albert Hitchcock broke the mold and encouraged photographers to collaborate with their subjects. Interesting. So there's a shot of Salvador Dali and the cats and the water. Got the wife and the kids to help throw some cats through the frame. And no Photoshop on this one. Amazing. At number 14 is Alberto Gorda's iconic photo of Che Guevara, Guerrilla Heroica from 1960. Here's a look at that historic photo. The article says, little did photographer Alberto Gorda realize when it took 2 frames of Fidel Castro's young associate as an afterthought that it would become such an iconic image. Upon his death 7 years later, his portrait of Che Guevara would become the most iconic image of rebellion and revolution for people around the world. Even still today, it is prevalent in the Cuban culture and around the world. Controversial as Che was, Whether you consider him a hero or a villain, the portrait stands the test of time. Here's another look at it. I know I've seen this image on t-shirts and whatnot, so it's kind of interesting to find out where it all came back from. At number 13 is James Natchway, Famine in Somalia from 1992. Here's a quick look at that historic photo. The article says, unable to get an assignment to document the 1992 famine in Somalia, photojournalist James Natchway decided to go alone. Supported on the ground by the Red Cross, Natchway captured the horrors of the famine. This, his most haunting image, captures a woman in a wheelbarrow waiting to be taken to a feeding center. After the publication of his harrowing images, the Red Cross received the biggest wave of public support since World War II and were able to save 1.5 million people. As a quote here by Natchway, it says, I have been witnessed and these pictures are my testimony. The events I have recorded should not be forgotten and must not be repeated. Again, it says, I have been witness and these pictures are my testimony. The events I have recorded should not be forgotten and must not be repeated. So again, another image that made people take notice and forced the Red Cross to take action and get a lot of those people fed in Somalia. At number 12 is the first photograph in history by Joseph Nicephore Niepce. View from the window at La Grasse, circa 1826. Here's a look at that image. 1826. The article here says, interestingly, the first permanent photograph ever taken was not by an artist, but by inventor Joseph Nicephore Niepce. His fascination with printing led him to set up a camera obscura at his studio in France in 1826. They go on to say, the window scene was cast on a pewter plate and presented a crude copy of the scene outside his window. It was an 8-hour exposure, and there is only one copy. A positive image. This is why the image is somewhat confusing, because the sun had moved across the courtyard during the exposure, causing shadows on both sides to appear. His groundbreaking work paved the way for the development of modern photography. So there it is, a little piece of history taken on a pewter plate. 1826, you see the shadows on both sides because of the sun moving. Crazy. At number 11 is the iconic VJ Day in Times Square by Alfred Eisenstadt in 1945. There's a look at it. Here's a quote by the photographer. He says, people tell me that when I'm in heaven, they will remember this picture. Albert Eisenstadt. The article says, Albert Eisenstadt's mission through this photograph was to find and catch the storytelling moment. In this post-World War II photograph in Times Square, he did just that. His famous photograph of the soldier and dental nurse has become one of the most iconic images of the 20th century, signifying the joyous end to years of war. Let me give you a full look at it. You see the heel up there, he's got her dipped down. So this was after the war, World War II. Came back, that's Times Square, laying a kiss on her. That's the dental student and the soldier. Kind of funny to see his buddy over here. You see this guy, he's cracking up. Alright, we made it to the top 10. I want to thank everybody for watching. Hopefully you guys are enjoying this content. Something a little bit different on the channel than I usually put out. I usually put out reseller content. If you guys are interested in that, check out my other videos. But let's get into this top 10 most historical videos, photographs rather. the top 10 most historical photos. Let's take a look at number 10.
At number 10 is Blind Beggar by Paul Strand from 1916. Here's a look at that image. Got the sign around her neck that says blind on it. Simple message.
The article here says Paul Strand's groundbreaking image of a blind woman was a candid portrait that departed from the more formal pose portraits of that time. Strand not only captured a moment in time when a country was changing rapidly due to an immigration surge, but he also took the first image that paved the way for a new style, street photography.
So there's another look at it. The beginning of street photography. Pretty cool. At number 9 is Lewis Hines' famous image Cotton Mill Girl from 1908. Here's a look at that image.
The article says, established in 1904, the National Child Labor Committee existed to fight for the rights of the child workers in the USA. They realized that the most powerful tool they had was to show the real face of these children. They believed that seeing these images of child labor would awaken the citizens to demand change. When Lewis Hine, an investigative photographer, came across Sadie Pfeiffer, one of the smallest children at work, standing at just 46 inches, he knew he had a shot that would change people's views. This photograph, along with others, was a crucial part of the campaign which led to change in legislation, the outcome of which was 50% cut in the number of child laborers over a 10-year period.
Here's another look at it. It's interesting to think about how all these images created such change or such movement. Cut labor laws by 50%, is that what they said? Crazy.
That's what it says, a 50% cut in the number of child laborers over a 10-year period. Wow.
At number 8 is Margaret Burke White's famous photograph, Gandhi and the Spinning Wheel from 1946. Here's a quick look at that image.
The article says, in 1946, Margaret Burke White's Life magazine's first female photographer was offered a rare opportunity to photograph Mahatma Gandhi. This dream opportunity quickly turned into a nightmare. She was made to overcome many challenges before gaining access to India's ideological leader, including to spin Gandhi's famous homespun. After 2 failed shoots, thanks to technical difficulties, it was third time lucky for Burke White. The iconic image of Gandhi at his spinning wheel was captured less than 2 years before his assassination. There's a note here in the article. It says, Burke White was an icon for me coming up as a young photographer. She seemed fearless and went where even some men dared not go. Her courage and fortitude influenced me and my work early in my career. There's a movie about her life, she's played by Farrah Fawcett, called Double Exposure. If you can get your hands on it, it's a great watch. So I think that's a note by the author about the movie with Farrah Fawcett called Double Exposure. Kind of about Burke White's struggle to get that image and probably her life story, I'd imagine. That might be worth checking out.
Here's another look at it. Third time's a charm. 2 shoots, and the third time they finally got this image. Sometimes you gotta stick with it to get a award winner like that. At number 7 is Nick Ut, The Terror of War from 1972. Here's a look at that image.
There's a quote here by the photographer Nick Ut. It says, the horror of the Vietnam War recorded by me did not have to be fixed. The article says, 25 miles northwest of Saigon war photography, Nick Ut captured one of the most harrowing images in the history of the Vietnam War. More often than not, the faces of those who suffer through the collateral damage of war are not seen. But the harrowing images of 9-year-old Phan Tin Kim Phuc forced the world to see. A victim of mistakenly dropped napalm, she was later helped by Ut and received life-saving treatment. At the time of publication in 1972, most newspapers had to relax their policies on nudity. The image remains controversial to this day. Recently, it was briefly removed from Facebook for the same reasons. Nick Ut won a Pulitzer Prize for his famous image in 1973.
At number 6 is Yusuf Karsh's iconic portrait of Winston Churchill from 1941. Here's a look at it. And he's got a look on his face there, hand on his hip. Look at that mug.
The article has a quote here by the photographer Yusuf Karsh. It says, "By the time I got back to my camera, he looked so belligerent, he could have devoured me. It was at that instant that I took the photograph." The article says, "In the wake of the attack on Pearl Harbor, Churchill arrived in Ottawa to thank the Allies for their assistance. Unaware that a photographer had been commissioned to take his portrait, he refused to remove his cigar. Once the photographer was set up, he walked towards Churchill, removed the cigar from his mouth, and took this famous photograph with the scowl." Of the incident, Churchill told Karsh, "You can even make a roaring lion stand still to be photographed." This image was one of the most widely reproduced political portraits. It gave photographers permission to take more honest and even critical portraits of their political leaders.
So that's the look you get when a photographer walks up to the political leader and takes the cigar out of his mouth. That's what you get. That grumpy old man look. At number 5 is Pulitzer Prize winning photographer Eddie Adams' Saigon Execution from 1968. Here's a look at that historical photo.
Article says Pulitzer Prize-winning photojournalist Eddie Adams was on the streets of Saigon on the 1st February 1968 photographing the devastation of the war. Believing he was witnessing a routine execution of a prisoner, he looked through the viewfinder of his camera to capture the scene. What he captured was the casual assassination of the prisoner. They also say this iconic photo became one of the most powerful images of the Vietnam War. It helped fuel the anti-war movement and end U.S. involvement in the war because it brought to life a horrific visual, the magnitude of the violence occurring.
At number 4 is Kevin Carter's controversial photo Starving Child and Vulture from 1993. Here's a look at that photo.
Article says this image is another Pulitzer Prize winning image as famous for its social impact as it is the ethical issues it raised. In 1993, South African photojournalist Kevin Carter traveled to Sudan to photograph the famine. This image of a collapsed child with a vulture stalking over her, not only caused public outrage because of the horrific subject, it also stirred up a lot of criticism directed toward the photographer for photographing the child rather than helping her. That day and the onslaught that came after continued to haunt Carter until he took his own life in 1994. For the record, the mother was apparently right next to the scene and the child was never in danger of being attacked by the bird. Notice that it was also shot with a longer telephoto lens, which makes a scene look more compressed, making the bird appear closer to the child than reality. If you want to learn more about this image and more shot by photojournalists in South Africa during the fall of apartheid, check out the Bang Bang Club. Watch the trailer below, and you can watch the full movie on YouTube.
Interesting to know that the photographer took his life several years later. The mother was right there, taken with a telephoto lens, so the bird looks actually closer to the child than was true. Lots of stuff go into an image. What you see sometimes not what you see. Reality is oftentimes different than what you see. At number 3 is Stanley Foreman's famous photo, Woman Falling from Fire Escape from 1975. Wow, what an image. Look at that. Falling from the fire escape. You got one up here. One up here, and look at that pot there falling. A lot going on in this one.
The article says Foreman was a well-known photographer working for the Boston Herald when he attended the scene of a fire. What began as him documenting the rescue of a young woman and child quickly took a turn when the fire escape collapsed. The pair began to fall, and he continued shooting as they were falling. He captured them swimming through the air. Foreman only lowered his camera and turned at the last moment when he realized what he was witnessing when a woman plummeting to her death. The famous photograph won Foreman a Pulitzer Prize, but its interesting legacy is the ethical questions it raised about when a photographer should stop shooting and whether it is appropriate to publish disturbing images. It also caused many municipalities to enforce stricter fire escape safety codes. So you decide.
Yeah, I guess it's even more sad when you know they're plummeting to their death. Fire escape gave out. Photographer was on the scene doing his job, snapped the photos. Can't really blame him, but I guess if the image leads to safety regulations being improved, then it did its job. At number 2 is the famous photo The Steerage by Alfred Stieglitz from 1907. I'm going to show this to you guys in 2 parts. There's the top of the photo. Looks like all the fellas up top there. And there's the bottom of the photo. Looks like the women and children down below.
The article here has a quote by the photographer. It says, I stood spellbound for a while. I saw shapes related to one another, a picture of shapes, and underlying it, a new vision that held me. Alfred Stieglitz. The article goes on to say, one of the most famous photographers of the early 20th century, Stieglitz fought for photography to be taken as seriously as painting as a valid art form. His pioneering work helped to change the way many viewed photography. His NYC galleries featured many of the best photographers of the day. His iconic image, The Steerage, not only encapsulates what was called straight photography, offering a truthful take on the world, it also gives us a more complex and multi-layered viewpoint that conveys abstraction through the shapes in the image and how those shapes relate to one another. Here's a note by the author. It says, many years ago, one of my instructors at my photography program in college showed us the steerage and talked about how important it was, how significant. The 20-year-old version of myself didn't get it. I admit it took me many years to understand its genius and its message, so if you don't get it right off the bat, you're in good company. Alright, we've made it to number 1, finally on the list of top 20. I want to thank everybody for watching thus far. If you could take a moment to like the video when we're done here, I would appreciate it. If you want to share it on a channel, it would be also appreciated. If you like this sort of thing, let me know with a comment. I'm happy to do some more of these historical photo lists. They're kind of fun to take a look at some of these more iconic images and learn about the history behind them. So let's take a look at number 1. Number 1 on the list is Henry Cartier-Bresson's famous photo of a man jumping the puddle from 1930. Henry Cartier-Bresson. So they just have a small image of it here on the page, which is interesting, but there it is, a man jumping the puddle from 1930. You can see his shadow there in the puddle. It's pretty cool. Alright, let's see what they have to say about number 1. It says, in this, one of the most iconic photos, Henry Cartier-Bresson captured a scene through a fence behind a Saint-Lazare train station in Paris. This image became the perfect example of what Cartier-Bresson referred to as the decisive moment. Quote, there is nothing in this world that does not have a decisive moment, by Henry Cartier-Bresson. The French photographer is often referred to as the father of modern photojournalism. He coined the term the decisive moment to refer to a moment when the photographer captures a fleeting second, immortalizing it in time. Alright, there you have it, the top 20. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this look at the top 20 images. Let me know in the comments, which was your favorite? Was there some new ones you'd never seen? Was there a new favorite? Is there others that they didn't put on the list that you'd like to share? Let me know. I'm always interested in taking a look at some of those photos and learning a little bit about the history of photography. If you want to follow my photo work, you can search Brian Kingsbury Photography on Instagram. I've got some stuff up there. I've got a couple fan pages on Facebook as well. One for my sports photography and one for my portrait work. Just search Brian Kingsbury. You'll find me on Facebook. Instagram, it's out there. Yeah, thanks again for watching. We'll catch you on the next one. Bye.